All right, back again for more. Today we're going to talk about this. It's not really new. It's the BASTL Tea Kick. But the last time you saw it in use, I really didn't cover all of its bizarre functionality. It is basically supposed to be a kick drum, but it does much more than that. I'm just going to use this clock to trigger it for the sake of demonstration purposes. You can, of course, do much more interesting rhythms, but just to hear it. We may have covered this before. There is, at the top, pitch. Which does exactly what you would expect. Underneath it, the resonance, which controls sort of how long the sound will sustain, but it also has an effect on the tuning. And you turn it all the way over here, you get these really short little clicks. And there's a range switch, which extends the range of the resonance. At a certain point, it will self-oscillate. And when it's doing that, it pretty much ignores the trigger input. The click still plays with the trigger. And now this knob down here controls the click pitch. If we do this, we can hear that. The sharpness of the click increases. Now the click tone is also affected by the pitch and resonance settings. And this knob down here is an attenuator for a CV input. And the CV controls the pitch. So if I plug an LFO into that, it kind of gets all rubbery, and you turn up the attenuator knob, it increases the range. Or you can narrow it by turning the attenuator down. So far, so good. That's all perfectly understandable. Now, Tea Kick has other outputs. So if for example, there is a click, which just gives you the click output. If you wanted to use that for something, you could process it separately. It might, I don't know if that is loud enough to be used as a trigger, but it might be possible. If you really needed to do that, if you ran out of multiples or splitters and you needed to reuse this trigger for something else. I haven't tested that, so don't quote me on it, but you might be able to use the click as a trigger. Or obviously, you can send it to some other destination and process it separately. Now, there's also a square wave output, which at first I thought that this was a square wave oscillator core and it was applying filters, and that the output was the filtered output, but I watched the official BASTL video on this, and Václav says that there's a comparator in here, and a comparator turns a sloped wave into a square wave by comparing it to a voltage threshold. So when the wave is higher than the threshold, the gate is on, and when the wave is lower, the gate is off. So the square wave output, if it's coming through a comparator, then this is a processed version of Tea Kick's normal signal, and it sounds like this. Completely weird. If I remove the trigger input, then we get this. Is it supposed to do that? When I move the pitch knob, if that's a glitch, it's a really interesting one. A couple of other guys have posted videos about the Tea Kick. None of them have talked about this. That's kind of disturbing and fascinating. If I plug in a CV, it squawks like a chicken. Let's plug our trigger back in and see what happens. That is crazy. Now if I turn up the range, then it turns into a siren, because at the high range, like I said before, it will ignore the trigger input. Let's take the trigger back out. Go back to our regular output. Now the other thing that you can do, and it's somehow I overlooked this, it even says in the manual, you can plug in an oscillator to the trigger and you get insanity. Now it likes, I goofed with this before making this video, and it prefers a wave shape with a hard attack, so either a square wave or a saw wave that starts high and slopes down. It doesn't work so well with a sine or a saw wave. But if changing the pitch of my oscillator, and then if I adjust the pitch of Tea Kick, it behaves kind of like a synced oscillator. And you get these interesting, like, synced and phasing effects. And in the lower frequency, it kind of farts like a tuba. The resonance will also affect it. And then the click adds a sort of buzziness to the sound. It's kind of like a low-pass filter there. This is fascinating. Oh yeah, I'm definitely going to have to mess with that some. But there's also this input, which they have labeled WTF. And the manual says that this acts like a low-pass filter using Tea Kick's circuits to process an external signal. So let's try that. Oh, I need to turn the mixer back up over here. It's kind of a little bit like a little bit. It's a little bit like plugging the oscillator into the trigger in, but not nearly as dramatic. What if we feed it a trigger while we're doing this? Not much, it just adds a click to that signal. How does that sound on the square wave output? Not too exciting, really. What happens if we connect another oscillator to the trigger in, and we have an oscillator connected to the WTF, and listening to that on the normal input? Interesting. The square output that's pretty nasty. Anyway, Tea Kick is capable of quite a bit more than your basic bass drum and flexible floppy tabla drum sort of sounds, which I was using it for when we saw it the last time. So that's one of the things about modular. There are always ways to abuse your modules and use them for stuff that, in this case, BASTL built this thing to be weird. But in a lot of cases, you can use a module in a way that perhaps it wasn't intended and get interesting effects. Just remember the caveat of don't plug an input into another input. That usually doesn't work out well. But other than that, sky's the limit, and there's loads of sonic fun to be had. Anyway, I've gone on for long enough, so there's BASTL Tea Kick, and we'll leave it there until next time. Thanks for watching.